Hey everyone, I hope you're doing really well. My name is Tanvi and today I'm going to be talking about audit versus consulting. Today we're going to be talking about audit versus consulting. So for those of you who don't know, I finished an audit grad scheme at one Big Four firm and I very quickly moved to another Big Four firm where I'm now in consulting. And as a disclaimer, of course, this is just my own experience and my own opinion. People have had very different experiences to me, and so I can only go off what I know. But I'm going to be talking about the differences, the similarities, kind of having been in consulting now for 4 or 5 months. Is there a difference? What are the pros and cons of both? And I think this could be quite useful for someone who's looking to apply to get into one of them. I often do feel like audit definitely has, how do I put this? I feel like audit gets scrutinised and it definitely is given a negative name. Sometimes it is unfairly, and I sometimes think consulting is maybe glamorised when in reality it's not always like that. So I kind of just want to bring the reality to you guys and just really break it down into different things in terms of salary, the people, the type of work, and I just think give you an insight into what it's really like. So if that's something you want to watch, then please keep watching. So the first thing I want to touch upon is the people. Now, I have noticed a massive difference between the people in audit and the people in consulting. Not so much my age and kind of like the senior associate level, because to be honest, I feel like I've made really good friends in both audit and consulting. But I do feel like the more senior you get and the older you get, in audit, people just seem a bit more unhappy. Now, obviously that's really generalized because they're choosing to stay there for a reason. But I just feel like they're always under so much more stress and so many more deadlines, and they don't necessarily enjoy the work, or it's not always as interesting as what I've done in consulting, where I just feel like people are a bit more relaxed, people like to have a bit more fun, and people just aren't as stressed all the time. I have definitely found that the people in consulting are also more varied, I would say. I feel like I've met a lot more people from lots of different backgrounds, whereas in audit, even though there were lots of people from different races, I do still think that everyone on my audit grad scheme came from quite a privileged background, and I just didn't feel like there was as much variety. I feel like a lot of the time it was people cut from the same cloth, if you get what I mean, and it just wasn't as varied in terms of diversity and backgrounds of people. Again, obviously that is my own experience, but I do feel like I have met so many different types of people having been in consulting for not a very long time. One thing I would say is that in audit, a lot of the time people say you don't really get exposure to like directors and partners, but I never found that. I feel like the exposure in the hierarchy is kind of the same in both, in that I don't feel like it is that hierarchical. I think it is dependent on the teams you're in though. But in audit, I was definitely really close to some very senior people, and I worked with partners outside of my team on other diversity and inclusion initiatives, as well as the partners on my team who were very approachable. We had a lot of exposure to them, and I found the same in consulting too, where I can just pick up the phone and call a partner and have a conversation about professional and personal life. I haven't found there to be quite a big difference in terms of hierarchy and exposure to more senior people in either, but I think that's just the nature of a Big Four firm. I think generally they do push for a lot of interaction between lots of different grades in both. One thing I would say is that I feel like audit, or at least the division I was in, which was banking, was actually a lot more technical. I feel like consulting is a lot more about the soft skills in terms of people and relationships and team building and leadership, whereas some of the audit work I had to do was so technical and so difficult that I do feel like some of the people I worked with in audit were maybe a lot more technically trained and maybe a bit more capable in some areas than some of the people I have worked in consulting. Not to say one is more intelligent than the other at all. I just feel like some of the roles in audit are more technical, and I found that more interesting and more difficult and more challenging than some of the stuff I have done in consulting. But again, I think it's just dependent on your projects and teams. So if you do want to go down the audit route and you kind of don't want to get bored, or you do want a challenge, I would definitely recommend going into something like banking, capital markets, private equity, hedge funds as your clients, because I do feel like they're often a bit more complicated than just like a FTSE company. Let's talk about money, because I know a lot of you guys want to talk about that. So I'm only obviously talking from a Big Four experience, and I don't know outside of Big Four what it's like, but there definitely is a salary jump between audit and consulting. I think partly because when you're in audit, they're paying for the ACA, so that's kind of like included as an addition to your salary. But definitely if I was in the same role that I am now in audit, I would be probably getting a significantly lower amount of salary than I am now. However, in the Big Four, I would say the bonus is the same. It's still pretty bad. It's still quite low. It's not the reason I'm at the firm, let's just say that. But yeah, bonuses are always quite low at the Big Four. However, the salary is definitely quite a bit more in consulting, and it would be even more in something like deal advisory or M&A. So just to give you an idea, I would say audit is probably the lowest in terms of salary. However, it's still not bad. Okay, let's talk about the level of work, complexity, difficulty. And I obviously did touch upon this in terms of speaking about people and capability of those people. I personally feel like audit was more difficult, and I don't know if that's just because it was more demanding in terms of busy season, the stress, it was just a bit more unenjoyable, and that also can impact how difficult you're finding the work. But I personally feel like audit was more difficult than some of the things I'm doing in consulting. I'm not saying consulting is easy, I'm just saying that some of the concepts I've had to grasp are easier for me to grasp, and it also might be the type of person I am or the type of learner I am. But sometimes in audit I did find myself struggling, or I found myself really in the deep end more than I have done in consulting so far. Having said that, I feel like in consulting you get a lot more variety in terms of the work. Now consulting is very project based, so your projects can be completely different. You can be doing completely different things project to project, which I personally prefer. I like having the variety and the exposure to lots of different things, especially this early on in my career. I feel like it benefits me so much more than being really niche banking, financial instrument and valuations specialist that I was in audit. So I feel like in audit you definitely do get pigeonholed into your client or into your sector, and there isn't that much variety. You also could be on audits for much longer than some of the projects you are in consulting, and you also tend to repeat audits because they are an annual process. You know, you are on the same audit year on year to help promote continuity of the team, so maybe you don't get as much variety. I think I got quite lucky when I was in audit because I was auditing a bank whose tenure finished when I was there after a year and a half, so it ended up meaning I rolled off into another bank, and so I did get a variety of different types of banks and longevities of those audits. But generally speaking, a lot of my friends in audit were on the same audit for 3 years, and that would just never happen in consulting, or at least you would have a bit more of a say in flexibility in terms of the work and when you want to roll on and off a project. I think in terms of flexibility, I've also found consulting to be a lot more flexible and a lot more relaxed. And I think this just comes down to the fact that audit is obviously a regulated industry. You have to stick by very strict deadlines, especially when they're a client of interest, or they're high profile, or they're in the news, or they are regulated. So you are under constant pressure and deadlines. I remember so many times in busy season being like, they're literally reporting this in the news tomorrow, like this has to be done. Whereas in consulting, a lot of the time, if you can have an agreed deadline, but if you miss it, it's not the end of the world. Like things can be pushed back a little bit, again subject to your client if you're working. Following on from people, I also just want to touch upon skills. I feel like the skills you need in consulting are more soft skill, and the skills you need in audit are a lot more technical. You need to be quite strong with Excel. Numerically, you need to be quite strong, and less so, I would say, with like client interactions. I used to speak to clients every day in audit, but it wasn't like I had to build really long-term relationships because I was never senior enough to kind of be gaining work or doing business development side of things. Whereas in consulting, I feel like you definitely need to be building long-term relationships with your clients. You need to be very good with people and just like handling different types of situations more than just being really technically trained on Excel. I also think you use PowerPoint a lot more in consulting than I ever did in audit. So if you're looking to get into consulting, I definitely would take up some like free courses in PowerPoint. But I would say, yeah, those are the different types of skills you would need for the two. The last thing I would say, and this is something that a lot of people said to me in my interviews when I asked them if I would struggle coming from audit into consultancy, and they said that there's just a lot more unpredictability in consulting. And this makes sense because the way audit works is that you obviously have very stringent deadlines. You've got Q1, Q2, you know, you have half year, full year, and you know exactly when you're going to be busy, you know exactly when you need to report by, so you can plan your time around that. you know when it's going to be busy season, etc. Whereas in consulting, like a project can just pop up like that and you're really busy, you don't know how long it's going to last for, so it's a lot more unpredictable. You don't really know what you're going to be doing this time in a few months. You can't often like plan the whole year out like you can in audit, so maybe things like booking holidays is a bit trickier. But having said that, I still think you do have a lot of control over your time, your flexibility, your annual leave, and even if you're on a busy project, if you've got annual leave, you've got annual leave, like that's what your team is there for. I just do find it is a bit more unpredictable, and I don't know what project I'm going to be on this time next year, but that is definitely a big difference between audit and consulting. So I hope that video was helpful. I definitely would have loved to have known just like the reality and the basics of the differences at a Big Four firm between those two divisions, because I would say specifically where I'm at, those are the two largest divisions in the Big Four. And so yeah, I hope that was helpful. Comment below if you have any further questions about this topic, and also let me know if you have any other video suggestions you want me to do. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Please also don't forget to follow me on Instagram, because I do loads of random bits about corporate on there. And I will catch you guys in my next video. Take care. Bye.